What is God's name? And no, it's not God. This is Project Truth Beam. And if you are looking for truth, you have come to the right place. In this video, we're going to talk about what is God's name. So some of y'all might be wondering, I thought God's name was God. That's what we call him, right? Well, actually, he has a name. The King James Bible, it has Jehovah 7 times. Every place that you see Lord in all caps in your English Bible, thanks to the King James Version, that is a reference back to God's name. So why is it that we hear Yahweh being God's name? And why don't the Jewish people believe that Yahweh is God's name? So where do we get Yahweh? Why is it that only in the Western academic world they refer to God's name as Yahweh? Have you ever asked yourself, what is God's name? And if you do, and you think that it's Yahweh, have you ever asked yourself, how do I know that it's Yahweh? What is the evidence that is Yahweh? We are going to explore all these questions. As you can see from the title, we are going to show you why God's name is not Yahweh. All of Western academia traces their reasoning for using the name Yahweh back to this man, Wilhelm Gesenius. He lived from 1786 to 1842. Here's a quote from Britannica on Gesenius's career. Quote, German biblical critic and important figure in Hebrew and other Semitic language studies. He was a pioneer of critical Hebrew lexicography and grammar. He also published a dictionary. A lot of what he did is very important to how we understand biblical Hebrew words today. Let's look into what Gesenius has to say. Gesenius brings two sources, Theodore of Cyrus from 500 AD, who stated that it was Yahweh, and a listing of names for God that came from the Middle East. And he particularly singled out the Samaritans. Gesenius put this in his dictionary in 1833. He admitted to choosing the Samaritan version of the name of God. He also declared that it was connected back to the Egyptians. He was pointing out that there must have been a group of Israelites in the land of Egypt that took it to the Samaritan region, and also a group of people that worship Jupiter in Greece that got the same name from the Egyptians. And he relied all that on there possibly being a future discovery in Egypt. Now, at that time, there was very little research done in Egypt. People were still trying to figure out things, and they could not read hieroglyphics, so people could say anything they wanted to about Egypt. And hopefully in the future, they would be correct. In this case, we never found anything like that in Egypt, so Gesenius was incorrect about that. But however, his linking to Jupiter and the name Yahweh is very key to this teaching. Now let's look at Josephus of Antiquities. In his book 12, chapter 5, section 5, he discusses the Samaritans. Now the Samaritans were Sidonians and other people that were brought into the land to live in the land of Israel. They were not Jewish people, however, because of their situation with lions attacking them and wild beasts attacking them, they assumed the worship of the God of the land. So they ended up practicing Judaism. However, their version of the Torah is a little different. They had a temple at the mountain called Gerizim. This is being the Samaritans. Though without a name, anomia, that's where we get the word anonymous. Let our temple, which at present has no name. So they were worshiping a God with no name at that moment at all. Be named the temple Jupiter, Hellenius. So in this case, the Romans were marching in, and the Samaritans were declaring that we're different, we're not like the Jews, and we don't want to be killed. This temple that we worship God at, who has no name, let's just change him to Jupiter. So that way the Romans won't come and get us. So they have this on record that they started using Jupiter as the name of their god at the Mount Gerizim. Now remember, Gesenius is the one who draws the connection to the Samaritans and Jupiter and the god Yahweh. The name the Samaritans used for the god Jupiter was Yahweh, and the short form was Yahweh. Pitor is father, and Yahweh is Father Yahweh. The O in that word was also pronounced as an ah sound, depending on the dialect. There is your proof that Yahweh is actually Jupiter that was worshipped at Mount Gerizim by the Samaritans, and Gesenius is sourcing that, thinking that is the God of the Bible.